If you are thinking of buying a 360 camera, it's quite likely you are looking at this, the Insta360 X4, because of its 8K resolution. You might even think this is the only 8K 360 camera in the market. But Canon has just released this QooCam 3 Ultra, which is also a 8K camera, but it has larger sensor, it can do real HDR recording, it has an active cooling system, it also has built-in GPS, internal storage, and some other features that the X4 cannot offer. So in this review, we will see how this camera performs in real life. I will tell you all the pros and cons of this camera, and I will also share with you all the comparison test results with the Insta360 X4 to help you choose the best 8K 360 camera for you. If you happen to click on this video by accident or you don't know anything about 360 camera, let me give you a very quick introduction about 360 camera. A 360 camera is pretty much what you think it is. It is a camera that can capture video or photo in 360 degrees, so every single direction, front, back, left, right, top button will be captured by the camera. It is usually done by having two cameras, each facing opposite direction, so each of them would capture more than 180 degrees field of view. And then when the camera then merge the image captured by these two cameras together, you will get full 360 degree field of view. I said usually two cameras because there are some other cameras like the Canon or CDN Pro that uses 8 APS-C cameras instead of just 2, but that one is a pro level 360 camera. Pretty much all the consumer level 360 cameras uses 2 cameras. After you capture the video, you can either directly view it as it is. So if you upload the video to YouTube, you can then watch it with a VR headset and you can have a fully immersive 360 degree video playback that follows the direction of your head. Or you can set your camera angle, field of view using the editing software that comes with the 360 camera. You have all the freedom to do whatever you want during editing. So this is one of the great things about 360 camera and one of the big reasons why I love to use it when I'm traveling. I just don't have to worry too much about the camera when I'm shooting. I just hold the camera without having to pay too much attention to where I'm pointing the camera to, so I can just enjoy the moment instead of focusing on operating the camera. Also, because of the ultra wide focal length, everything would be in focus as well because you have a very deep depth of field. So again, I don't have to worry about what is in focus or what's not in focus because pretty much everything is in focus. And if you hold a selfie stick and film yourself, the selfie stick will become invisible in the final video. It's because the position of the selfie stick is right between the front and the back camera, so it got removed after the video is stitched together. In the output video, it looks like the camera is just floating in the air, nobody is holding it. Now, you may have the question, why 8K? Do we really need 8K? Isn't it overkill? And the answer is, yes, we do need 8K. We definitely need it even for casual users. The reason is because the camera is capturing 360 degree video or photo. So when you actually view the footage, we usually would zoom in just a small part of the 360 degree footage. So having higher resolution means after you zoom in and just look at a particular section of the video, you would still have decent resolution for the final output video. So 8K definitely is not overkill. Before we continue, some usual disclaimer first. The sample unit I used in this review was provided to me by Canon. I do not have to return the unit after this review. They have also invited me to join their beta testing program, so I have early access to the camera before the official release. All the tests I did in this review were done using this pre-production sample and running pre-production firmware. I have received a number of firmware updates during this beta period, and I have tried to redo most of the testing using the latest firmware that I have received from Candle, but some of the tests or screenshots that you will see in this review may still come from an earlier firmware version. And as usual, this is a completely independent review. I have not received any money from Candle for this review. As mentioned just earlier, this camera is Candle's fourth 8K 360 camera. Before this, there was the Obsidian R, QooCam 8K, QooCam 8K Enterprise, which are all 8K 360 cameras. Candle also has their flagship Obsidian Pro, which is a professional 12K 360 camera using 8 APS-C sensor. So this QooCam 3 Ultra is their fifth camera that can record in 8K or higher resolution 360 footage. Interestingly, the design of this QooCam 3 Ultra is completely different from all their previous 8K camera. The body is a rectangular shape, almost square shape, with offset lens design. It looks very similar to the base model QooCam 3, but is a bit taller and bigger in size. If you compare it with the Insta360 X4, the QooCam 3 Ultra has a much wider body, which does make it slightly harder to hold compared to the long thin Insta360 X4. However, the advantage is that it allows Candle to install a wide landscape orientation LCD screen on the camera. Even though Insta360 X4 screen is physically bigger, I found QooCam 3 Ultra's screen is just a lot more practical. The reason I say that is because I can see a much wider angle preview with the QooCam 3 Ultra screen, which I can see more of the left and right side. Another good thing with this landscape orientation screen is that it allows Candle to include a bunch of very useful information on the screen and still not blocking the preview. So we have all the exposure information, ISO, shutter speed, and we can also see some other important settings. For example, what is the resolution you choose and whether GPS is working or not, and whether the dynamic range boost is enabled or not. There are a lot more information displayed on the QooCam 3 Ultra screen compared to the X4. I'm sure more advanced users will appreciate that. It is also a touch screen and it is very responsive. In terms of the quality of the screen, I think the Insta360 X4 still has better quality screen, as I found the colors are a bit more accurate with the Insta360 X4. The colors look a little bit too cold with the QooCam 3 Ultra's screen. I just mentioned before, the camera's lenses has an offset design. The reason why Candle did that instead of having the two lenses on the same axis is to maximize the image quality, as otherwise they have to do a folded optics design to reduce the size, but that would also impact the image quality. When I checked with Mr. Dan Chen, CEO of Candle, he told me the company has spent a lot of efforts creating these optics, as these are designed to meet 14K resolution requirements. Most other companies using similar size sensor and lenses only design the lenses for 1/4 of that resolution to reduce costs. He told me these are the same lenses as the one used on the QooCam 3, but now with QooCam 3 Ultra's higher resolution sensor, we starting to see the real benefit of this high quality optics. The offsetted lens design also allows them to put a faster f1.6 aperture lens on the camera, which is about half stop faster than Insta360 X4's f2 lenses. This should help improve QooCam 3 Ultra's low light performance as well. But we'll have a look and see if QooCam 3 Ultra's image quality is really better or not a little bit later on in this review. The QooCam 3 Ultra is not only bigger than the QooCam 3, it's also a bit heavier. Actually, quite a bit heavier. I measured the weight of my sample QooCam 3 Ultra. It is around 337 grams with the battery. The QooCam 3 is only 223 grams with the battery, so the QooCam 3 Ultra is about 50% heavier than the base model QooCam 3, which is quite significant difference. The Insta360 X4 is even lighter in comparison, as my measurement says is only 204 grams with the battery. Now you may think 100 grams or so difference is not really that big, but when you put the camera on a long selfie stick, then you will feel the difference in weight, especially after holding the selfie stick for a while. But there are a few very good reasons why the QooCam 3 Ultra's body is bigger and heavier. First of all, it uses a much more powerful Qualcomm Snapdragon 865 processor. It is a really powerful processor for a camera, which gives it enough power to do things like real HDR output and many other advanced features. And to allow 8K recording for an extended period of time, the camera has an active cooling system. There is a cooling fan inside the camera, so the camera wouldn't overheat easily even when recording 8K footage. Now, with the more powerful processor 8K recording, the camera also has a bigger battery. There's also built-in GPS and internal storage memory space. We'll look at all these major new changes and features and what does it mean to the user later on in this review as well. The build quality of the QooCam 3 Ultra is excellent. It feels very solid and premium. But don't drop it, as I don't think these two extruded lenses would like to kiss the floor. Canon has created lens guard for the camera, so if you are intending to use it as an action camera and you will put camera in places that may damage the lens, then I would recommend you to use the lens guard to protect your lenses. I've not received the lens guard sample by the time that I do this review, so I cannot comment on how it may affect the image quality. But lens guard for other 360 cameras like the one for the X4 would cause some image quality degradation and lens flare, so I wouldn't be surprised if this is the same for the QooCam 3 Ultra as well. On a similar note, all the comparison footage in this review from the X4 were shot without the lens guard to make it fair. The camera has IP68 weather rating. It means the camera is dust proof, and you can also fully submerge the camera underwater for a reasonable period of time. Just don't go deep sea diving with this camera. There's a power button and mode button on the side of the camera. Because the camera uses Android as the operating system, so powering up the camera takes around 20 seconds, which is pretty slow. Fortunately, this slow power on speed is only for the first power on a particular day. Once you have power on the camera once, then even if you power it off, the next time when you power it on, it will be much faster, almost instant. But that is only if it's within 8 hours of your previous shutdown. So it seems Canon has implemented a 2-stage power off for this QooCam 3 Ultra, a bit like what the latest Panasonic cameras do. The camera will go into a light power off mode when you first power it off, and then it will go into a deep power off mode after you don't touch it for more than 8 hours. The mode button allows you to choose from a number of different photo and video shooting mode, including loop recording, time-lapse, interval, DNG8 and AEB. The QooCam 3 Ultra can also shoot video using a single camera to capture 180° instead of 360° if you want. This is a feature that was missing from the original QooCam 3, but the QooCam 3 Ultra doesn't have any equivalent feature to Insta360's Me mode or bullet time mode. On the front, there are 3 buttons below the screen. The center is the record button. This is a better placement than the original QooCam 3, which is at the top. It's much easier to press. On the right side, there is a button for you to switch between whether you want to preview 360 panorama image or zoom into a particular part of the image. When you want to preview a particular part of the image, you can also use the touch screen to adjust the camera angle or zoom in the image as well. On the left is the Q button, which is a customizable button that you can assign to trigger one of the few selectable actions. This is a very handy feature. However, what you can customize is pretty limited at the moment, at least with the firmware that I'm using right now. Pretty much everything that you can select can already be easily accessible from the main screen. So I feel Candle can probably do a bit more to allow user to map this to some of the more important settings directly that are deep inside the menu. For example, directly enable or disable the DR boost feature, which we'll talk about in a minute, or maybe even allow user to create different shooting presets. So the user can choose one of the presets by just clicking on the Q button. I have discussed this with Candle and they said they will definitely look into this area in the future. The camera has a USB-C port on the side, which is for transferring data and also charging. When I connect the QooCam 3 Ultra to my MacBook Pro, the computer would automatically pop up the Android file transfer app, and from there I can copy photos and videos from the camera, no matter it's from the camera's built-in memory or from the micro SD card. Actually, I could also copy files to the camera if I want, so I could use the camera as a portable storage. Speaking of storage, the camera has 100GB of internal storage space for you to save your photos or video. How much video or photos that you can record really depends on the resolution and settings. For example, 8K 30 8-bit high quality recording is approximately 1 GB per minute. Standard quality is approximately 0.7 GB per minute. So if I record in 8K 30 8-bit standard quality, I could record almost 140 minutes, which is plenty for most users. I use the internal storage for most of the beta testing as I find it just more convenient, as I don't have to remove the micro SD card to copy the videos to my computer and then put it back. When I got home, I just plug in the QooCam 3 Ultra to my computer. This way I can transfer the files and also charge the camera at the same time. Having the internal storage means I will never have the issue that I forgot to put the memory card into the camera and end up cannot record anything when I go out to the place that I want to shoot some video or photos. It seems a bit silly if someone forgot to put the memory card back into the camera before they went out and do some shooting. But honestly, I have done that so many times in the past with my other 360 camera or action cameras. Recording to internal storage is also very stable. I haven't even once had the recording that just suddenly stopped because of some write issues. If you ask me, I think having both the built-in storage and a micro SD card slot is a huge selling point for this camera. Not only is a lot more convenient with the built-in storage, but with two different storage space also opens up a lot of possibilities for what Candle can do that its competitors like the Insta360 X4 can't offer. But at the moment, the camera has only very basic settings available. You can choose to save to either the internal storage or the micro SD card. That's all. When I discussed this with Candle, they told me right now they are focusing on all the core functionality for the initial release, but they are very interested to see what additional features that they can add in this area later on, including some of the suggestions I gave them as well. So I guess we have to wait and see what Candle might do in the future. Speaking of memory storage, if you have watched my QooCam 3 review, you may remember I complained about it's quite hard to remove the micro SD card from the original QooCam 3. It seems Candle has made some improvements this time. While the location of the micro SD card slot is the same, which is right next to the battery, this time it is much easier to remove the micro SD card. I no longer struggle to remove the SD card from the QooCam 3 Ultra. With this issue now fixed, I definitely like it more than the Insta360's design, which you have to first remove the battery before you can access the micro SD card on the X4. QooCam 3 Ultra uses two 1/1.7 inch sensor. The size of the sensor is a bit smaller than the QooCam 3, which is 1/1.55 inch. If you wonder why the Ultra's sensor is smaller than the original QooCam 3, it's because Candle wants to use a higher resolution sensor for the Ultra, and the 64 megapixel sensor that they want to use is just slightly smaller. But while QooCam 3 Ultra's sensor is smaller than the QooCam 3, it is still bigger than the Insta360 X4's sensor, which is 1/2 inch. The image sensor is a 4:3 aspect ratio sensor. Because 360 cameras use circular fisheye lens that only covers a square area, so the camera only uses part of the sensor and the effective resolution is 48 megapixel per camera, which means the total effective resolution from the two cameras together is 96 megapixel. I can argue the actual resolution is a bit lower than that because the actual area that has image projected on is about 79% of that 1:1 square sensor area. But let's not go too deep into it this time, as we do have a lot of other very important things I want to discuss in this review, and this is also how all the other 360 camera company measure the resolution as well. So anyway, QooCam 3 Ultra's 64 megapixel sensor is higher resolution than the Insta360 X4's 48 megapixel sensor, which has an effective resolution of 36 megapixel using the same calculation. Now, a little fun fact, Insta360 X4's sensor is the same size and same resolution as the Insta360 X3. The X4 can output 8K video, while X3 can only do 5.7K. So why is it and how is it possible? Well, the sensor used by all these cameras are quad Bayer sensor, which means the sensor would usually combine 4 neighbor pixels into a bigger pixel, a super pixel. This is to create better quality, cleaner output image. The bigger super pixel is what the X3 and X4 use to create the 5.7K video output. But X4's sensor doesn't have enough super pixels to create 8K video output. So what Insta360 did is, they used the small individual pixel instead of the super pixel when shooting in 8K. So the camera would now have enough resolution to output 8K, but the output won't be as clean as it's not using the bigger super pixel from the quad Bayer sensor. On the other hand, the 64 megapixel sensor used by the QooCam 3 Ultra does have enough resolution to output 8K by just using the super pixels. Combining this with QooCam 3 Ultra's larger sensor, it means it should have much better noise performance than the Insta360 X4. So let's have a look at some of my test results to see if it's actually true or not. Okay, now let's do some comparison of the video quality between the QooCam 3 Ultra and the Insta360 X4. All these comparison videos were shot in 8K 30 using standard settings. At base ISO 100, QooCam 3 Ultra's video is very nice and clean, and it's also very sharp, like very sharp. Compared it with the 8K video shot with the Insta360 X4, there's a big difference between the sharpness and details. Look at the top of this comparison, the white boxes and the yellow box. You can see the QooCam 3 Ultra is just much sharper. As we increase ISO, we're starting to see more noise in the video. But even at ISO 1600, I feel the video from the QooCam 3 Ultra, the image quality is still quite acceptable. On the other hand, the video from the X4 at ISO 1600 is pretty bad quality. And that's also the highest ISO that you can go when you are shooting at 8K resolution on the X4. That's probably the reason why the X4 would prompt you to switch the recording to 5.7K when there isn't enough light. So let's switch the X4 to 5.7K now. When we go up to ISO 3200, the QooCam 3 Ultra video now has a lot more noise. Contrast drops a bit and I'm starting to see a bit of color shift in the shadow area. But I would say the video is still quite usable, for me at least, and it is much better than the X4. At the maximum ISO 6400, image quality from the Ultra isn't that good at all. It's very noisy and the contrast also drops a lot. We also lose quite a bit of details as well. But once again, if we compare it with the X4 is noticeably worse than the QooCam 3 Ultra. Now, I did another round of tests. This time, I shot some video on a street at night. For this side-by-side comparison, both cameras were shooting in 8K. The video from the X4 is pretty noisy, but also pretty mushy. The video from the QooCam 3 Ultra is also quite noisy, but it retains a lot more details and the overall image quality is much better. Then I switched the X4 to record in 5.7K by keeping the QooCam 3 Ultra at 8K. Now, shooting in 5.7K, X4's video is cleaner with less noise, but QooCam 3 Ultra is still better. However, one thing I think the X4 does better is colors. X4's color just look more natural to me. QooCam 3 Ultra's color looks slightly oversaturated. If you look at the color of the blue jacket I'm wearing, the X4's color looks much closer to the real color. And let's compare the QooCam 3 Ultra with the original QooCam 3. The original QooCam 3 did really well when I compared it with the other 360 cameras last year. So let's see how the QooCam 3 Ultra's performance is like when we put it next to the QooCam 3. From base ISO to ISO 800, there really isn't too much difference between these two cameras. The video from the QooCam 3 Ultra has a little bit more details because of its higher resolution output, but overall they are very similar. Once we reach ISO 1600, then we're starting to see a bit of difference between these two cameras. The video from the QooCam 3 has more noise and the fine details are harder to see. The QooCam 3 Ultra has less noise, however, QooCam 3 Ultra's video has lower contrast. Colors also seems to be not quite as good as the QooCam 3. So I think some people may prefer the cleaner looking video from the QooCam 3 Ultra, but to me, I like the video from the QooCam 3 a little bit more. Before we look at the photo quality test, one thing I want to mention is that if you record in 5.7K using the QooCam 3 Ultra, it is oversampled from the 8K footage, which means the 5.7K video from the QooCam 3 Ultra should be virtually the same quality as if you shoot in 8K and then downsample to 5.7K on your computer yourself. But if you are buying the QooCam 3 Ultra, I would suggest you just shoot in 8K as the extra resolution does give you more details once you zoom in. The only reason I think you should shoot in 5.7K is if you want to shoot in 60 frames per second, as you can only go up to 30 frames per second when you're shooting in 8K. You can go up to 120 frames per second when you are shooting 360 video in 4K resolution. The 120 frames per second video can definitely look very cool if you want to create some slow motion video. But there's also some significant drop in details when you compare to the 8K footage from the QooCam 3 Ultra. Okay, now let's have a look at the photo image quality from the QooCam 3 Ultra, and we'll also compare it with the Insta360 X4 as well. All the comparison photos I'm going to show you were shot in DNG RAW format. I converted them to JPEG using Adobe Lightroom using default settings. Since the output from the QooCam 3 Ultra is 96 megapixel while the Insta360 X4 is only 72 megapixel, so I resized the QooCam 3 Ultra's photo to match the X4 resolution so we can have some better comparison. So start with the base ISO 100. If we zoom in the photo from the QooCam 3 Ultra is a lot sharper with a lot more details. If you look at the white boxes and the yellow box next to it at the top again, we can see there is a lot more details from the QooCam 3 Ultra. When we go up to ISO 400, the X4 photo has even less details. The photo from the QooCam 3 Ultra still retains a lot of fine details, but the noise level does go up quite a bit. Once we reach ISO 1600, which is X4's maximum ISO, the photo from the X4 is pretty much like water painting. There's no fine details remaining at all. If you look at QooCam 3 Ultra's photo, there is quite a lot of noise, but we can still see all the fine details. Remember, this is RAW converted to JPEG using default settings, so if you want to have less noise from the QooCam 3 Ultra, you can dial in some additional noise reduction, but doing that you will give up some fine details. But on the other hand, you cannot do the opposite with the X4, as it seems the camera has already applied some pretty strong noise reduction and baked it into the X4's RAW file when you are shooting at high ISO. With the QooCam 3 Ultra, you can go up 2 more stops to ISO 6400 maximum. At ISO 3200, the photo is still surprisingly usable. However, once we reach ISO 6400, the image quality has dropped significantly, so I would say this is probably for emergency use only. I've then done some comparison with the QooCam 3. The QooCam 3 Ultra's image is also downsampled to match the size. At base ISO, QooCam 3 Ultra is a bit sharper and you can see more details than the QooCam 3, which is not really a surprise as QooCam 3 Ultra's original photo is higher resolution. As we increase the ISO, we start to see more noise from the QooCam 3 Ultra's photo. The noise level is higher than the QooCam 3, but the QooCam 3 Ultra also maintains a bit more details than the QooCam 3. Before I did this test, I thought when we reach higher ISO, QooCam 3 Ultra's image quality would start fall behind the QooCam 3 because the QooCam 3 Ultra sensor is slightly smaller and also higher resolution than the QooCam 3. But interestingly, looking at the results I shot at ISO 6400, the image quality is very similar between these two cameras. The QooCam 3 Ultra is slightly more noisy, but it maintains a bit more details, so I think overall the photo quality is very similar between these two cameras even at the maximum ISO 6400. The QooCam 3 Ultra has a new feature called DR Boost or Dynamic Range Boost. This feature allows you to capture higher dynamic range. What Kendall did is pretty clever. The sensor on the QooCam 3 Ultra is a quad Bayer sensor as we mentioned before, which means 4 small pixels are grouped together create a larger super pixel to improve the noise performance. When you enable the DR Boost feature, instead of using it as a super pixel, they divide these 4 small pixels into 3 groups, and each group will have a different exposure time. So one group is the normal exposure that matches the exposure setting on the camera, then one group is 1/4 the exposure time, and then one group is 1/16 the exposure time. So it means the camera is doing a single exposure but capturing at different exposure time. Kendall claims there is a 4-stop improvements in terms of dynamic range in high light area. These are 2 photos both shot with the same exposure settings. One is a normal photo and one is with the DR Boost enabled. If you look at the studio light, the normal photo is completely blown out. The photo shot with DR Boost enabled, you can see a lot more highlight details. Here is another example of the DR Boost. Again, there is a huge difference in terms of highlight area when DR Boost is enabled. The amount of dynamic range it managed to capture is pretty impressive for a camera in this class. While the DR Boost does give you noticeable improvements to the dynamic range, there are a few trade-offs that you need to be aware of. The first one is because the DR boost feature relies on changing the individual small pixels exposure time to capture an extended dynamic range for the same pixel. So when you are shooting photo with the DR boost feature enabled, the photo resolution is only 24 megapixel instead of 96 megapixel. The second trade-off is since some of the pixels are now exposing at a faster shutter speed and collecting less light information, so there is some sacrifice in low light performance. According to Kendall, DR Boost trades approximately 2 stops of shadow area performance for 4 stops of improvement in highlight dynamic range. Because of that, Kendall recommends users not to use DR Boost feature when shooting under low light condition and need to shoot at higher ISO. One thing I suggest you to do is, if you're shooting photo in RAW format or capturing video in 10-bit, try increase the exposure by 2 stops when you enable DR Boost. The exposure will be different as the image will now be much brighter, so you will need to reduce the exposure by 2 stops when you are doing your editing. But you should still get 2 stops of highlight dynamic range improvement, and there should not be any noticeable penalty in shadow area even if you try to push shadow details during editing. The only real downside with the DR Boost feature is that it seems to lose some color information. Look at this comparison. Photo with the DR Boost enabled, the color seems to be a bit more muted compared to the normal photo. Okay, we just talked about the DR Boost feature, and we should talk about another similar feature next, that is the HDR video output. While some 360 cameras may have a HDR video mode, but what they mean is it just increased the dynamic range. The output video is still in 8-bit format, which is not real HDR video at all. Real HDR video needs to be 10-bit and the colors are encoded in a special color space. If you play a real HDR video on a compatible HDR screen, the bright area will be really bright. You will see much higher dynamic range than a normal video. QooCam 3 Ultra is the first consumer level 360 camera that can do real 10-bit HDR video using the BT 2020 standard. Before I received the camera, Kendall has told me many times that I really need to try out the 10-bit HDR video. I was thinking it's probably just a gimmick. I don't really think it would make that much a difference, and how wrong I was. The first weekend after I received the QooCam 3 Ultra, our family had a day trip and went to a nearby city, so I took the QooCam 3 Ultra with me. It was a beautiful day and I shot many videos. Some are the normal 8-bit video and some are 10-bit HDR video. When I got home and I copied all the video to my computer, and I was like, oh, how am I going to tell which video were shot in 8-bit and which were shot in 10-bit HDR mode? But when I played the video, even just the original 360 fisheye video before any editing, I can tell the difference immediately. The HDR video looks really amazing. The highlight really pops on my MacBook Pro's display. The bright area is just really bright and the colors are absolutely beautiful. Unfortunately, this review is rendered in the normal 8-bit SDR output, as I don't really know how to render the video output in BT 2020 HDR format using DaVinci Resolve, so I can't show you the HDR footage in this review. But I have separately uploaded some HDR videos that shot using the QooCam 3 Ultra, so if your screen supports HDR, please check them out. They look really amazing. Another really cool feature available on the QooCam 3 Ultra is the built-in GPS. With the built-in GPS, the camera can automatically geotag the photo or video you shot with the camera using the GPS coordinates from the camera. So if you shot a photo, you can check the location easily from any photo software that supports location information. And if you shot video, it is even better because it doesn't just capture the start or end point of the video, it captures your location throughout the whole video. So what you need to do is, when you export the video from QooCam Studio, you just need to enable the export GPX file option. Then QooCam Studio will create a .gpx file next to the video file. GPX is an open format for storing GPS information. You can then import the GPX file to Google Maps to create a map that shows you the route that you travel when you capture the video. If we look at this example, it was quite a short 5 minutes walk, so I didn't walk that far, but the result is really accurate. And this is just a very basic example to use the location data. You can also upload to Google Street View, for example. And since GPX is an open format, there are many other ways that you can use the GPX location data. Candle themselves are going to implement additional features to show a map overlay in their editing software in the future. This is amazing for anyone who wants to use the QooCam 3 Ultra as a travel camera, as we can see exactly where we took each of the photo or video. I shot a bunch of videos using the QooCam 3 when I was in Japan back in May. And honestly, it was just 2 months ago and I already forgot where I shot half of those videos. I really wish I was shooting with the QooCam 3 Ultra instead, so I can now see exactly where I was when I shot each of these videos. Some other cameras like the Insta360 X4 can do geotagging as well, but they all either rely on external accessory or other additional steps to sync GPS information from other devices, which, to be honest, I myself just can't be bothered to do that, as it's just too much hassles, especially if I'm on holiday and traveling. I'm pretty lazy. I want something that just works without me having to carry a bunch of accessory or do some extra steps. So I'm really excited about the QooCam 3 Ultra's built-in GPS because it just works automatically every time I turn on the camera. So Candle said they choose to use the offset lens design for the QooCam 3 Ultra because it allows them to create better image quality and also has a faster lens to improve low light performance. However, the downside is that the image from the two lenses are not on the same axis, so they may not stitch as well as if you compare to camera where the front and the rear lens are on the same axis like the Insta360 X4. It may not really be a problem if the thing that you are shooting are far away, but when your subject is at close distance, then things may look a bit weird. Both Candle and Insta360 offers a few different stitching options in their editing software. Choosing different options would change how the stitch image would look, but it will also dramatically affect the time it takes to render the video. I'll start with the optical flow stitching option first, as it's one of the more standard stitching options. I start with me standing about 1.5 meters away from the camera. There is a small amount of ghosting with both cameras at some particular angle, but overall it looks pretty good. At 1 meter, there's a bit more ghosting, but still I think the result is fine, even though I'm standing right between the front and rear camera. However, my face looks a little bit squashed in the video from both cameras. If I enable the dynamic stitching feature in QooCam Studio, then my face looks better and not so squashed. However, the building behind me now has some artifacts. Interestingly, enabling the same dynamic stitching option in Insta360 Studio makes my face looks even more squashed. At 80 cm distance, the QooCam 3 Ultra's footage with the dynamic stitching enabled looks quite good. My face looks more normal and not as squashed, as the X4 video output. However, the QooCam 3 Ultra video has a bit of artifact when I move my head a bit. The X4 is better in this area. At 60 cm distance, the result is still very similar. Now I move even closer, so the distance is now only 40 cm, which is really close. If you look at the QooCam 3 Ultra video, if I don't move, my face looks kind of okay, but once the position of my face move a little bit, then everything starts to distort in a very strange way. In comparison, while in the X4 video, my face is quite a bit squashed, at least when I move my face a bit, everything still looks quite natural. So if your subject is 60 cm or further away from the camera, even at the worst angle, both cameras handles quite well. But if you need to get closer, then the Insta360 X4 will give you better results. The QooCam 3 Ultra has a new battery QZMB5037, which is a 3.85 volt 22,080 mAh battery. Just like the camera itself, the QooCam 3 Ultra battery looks quite similar to the one for the original QooCam 3, but it is a little bit bigger. There's a little tab on the battery for you to remove the battery from the camera. The first time that I tried to do that, the battery was really tight and I have to use quite a bit of force to pull the battery out. After removing the battery a few times, the battery seems to have loosened a bit, or maybe I just get more used to how to do that. So, okay, nothing bad has happened, but I would honestly prefer the battery design for the Insta360 X4, which is easier and also feels safer to remove from the camera. In terms of battery life, I managed to record 47 minutes of 8K footage with a single battery. It's acceptable, but certainly not great. In comparison, Insta360 X4's battery life is significantly better. I can get around 70 minutes of 8K recording time. That is, if the X4 doesn't overheat, which I will talk about next. But anyway, if you are buying a QooCam 3 Ultra, I would suggest you to buy at least an extra battery, which, to be fair, I would recommend the same if you buy the Insta360 X4 as well, as one battery is really not enough even though the X4 has longer battery life. Now, a good news is the QooCam 3 Ultra can be powered by a USB power source, so you can record as long as you want. You can even completely remove the battery from the camera and just let the USB power source to power the camera, as long as your USB power source can supply enough current and voltage that is required by the camera. There's a battery charging case that you can buy separately that allows you to charge two batteries at the same time. If you are planning to shoot a lot of photos or videos using this camera, I would highly recommend you to get this charging case, as it makes charging battery a lot easier and you can charge two at the same time without having to connect a USB power to the camera. Unlike some charging case that also contains a built-in battery, this charging case is purely just a charging case. But you can also use this to charge the batteries for the QooCam 3 using the provided spacer. Let's talk about another very important topic, that is overheating. For such a small camera that can record high resolution video from two cameras, overheating can be an issue. I myself have experienced overheating with pretty much all the 360 cameras that I've used, the X3, X4 and also QooCam 3. So I want to do some overheating tests with the QooCam 3 Ultra and the Insta360 X4 together. Turns out it was a bit harder than I thought. First reason is that it's currently winter here in New Zealand. Temperature is around 15 degrees Celsius or 59 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's not really demanding at all. I end up testing it in this studio here and I turn up the heater in this room, so temperature is around 24 degrees Celsius or 75 degrees Fahrenheit. Still not very hot, but it's better than testing it at a 15 degrees Celsius temperature. Then the second problem I ran into is battery life. As I've mentioned before, the QooCam 3 Ultra's battery can only last around 50 minutes or so. When I did my first overheating test, the battery died and there was still no sign of overheating at all with the QooCam 3 Ultra. Kendall, they have sent me 2 batteries, but I noticed that even when I swapped the battery as soon as the first battery died, the temperature of the camera would already drop a few degrees Celsius by the time I restart recording, so it's not really ideal. In the end, I decided to use a USB power supply to power or charge the battery when recording. Doing this could potentially make the camera a little bit warmer, but I'm doing the same to both the QooCam 3 Ultra and the Insta360 X4, so I think it is a fair thing to do. Then the next problem I encountered is the Insta360 X4's recording just keeps stopping randomly. The X4 would pop up a message that complained about card is not fast enough after I recorded for about 20 minutes or so, even though I'm already using a SanDisk 330 card which meet the recommended speed. I don't have problem at all with the QooCam 3 Ultra, so in the end I've tried all my different micro SD cards. Finally, one of the cards seems to be more stable and I managed to finish my test without the X4 suddenly stop recording prematurely. I was recording in 8K 30 with standard settings. I disabled the auto screen off feature on both cameras so I can see the status clearly in case something goes wrong during the test. GPS is enabled on the QooCam 3 Ultra. After I started recording, the temperature of both cameras increased quickly and it reaches about 40 degrees Celsius or 104 degrees Fahrenheit in less than 5 minutes. The X5 reaches 50 degrees Celsius in less than 10 minutes and the Ultra took about 20 minutes to reach the same temperature. Once the Ultra reached around 50 degrees Celsius, I heard the cooling fan start to work really hard. I can hear the fan noise suddenly become pretty loud. And the cooling fan definitely helps as the temperature increases much slower once the cooling fan starts running at full speed. After 95 minutes, the X4 stopped recording when the outside temperature of the camera reaches 65 degrees Celsius. At that time, the temperature of the Ultra was around 55 degrees Celsius. The temperature of the Ultra remains pretty much unchanged until it finally stopped at 2 hours 19 minutes. And it stopped because it has used up all the 100GB internal storage space recording 8K 30 footage. The camera did not overheat. Actually, the camera's outside body temperature pretty much stabilized after about 50 minutes of recording and it has only raised 1 degree Celsius over the next 80 minutes. I could have continued the recording by just deleting the file and start again, but I really don't see any point to continue the test as I don't think the camera will ever overheat with that ambient temperature. Okay, let's do a bit of audio quality test now. I'm now recording using the QooCam 3 Ultra and audio is captured using the built-in microphone. I also have the Insta360 X4 recording at the same time as well and audio is also captured using the built-in microphone. So I'm going to switch the audio between these two cameras so you can hear the difference in terms of the audio quality that is captured by each of these cameras. The QooCam 3 Ultra has 4 built-in microphones that capture audio from different directions. On the camera, there isn't any audio settings available for you to change how the audio is captured. But when you process the video on your computer, then there are a few different options available that you can choose how you want the audio to be processed. If you want to use an external microphone to capture audio with the QooCam 3 Ultra, there are a few different options as well. So let me switch to an external microphone and continue this test. I've just switched to an external microphone, so what you're hearing right now is captured using the Holyland Last M2 microphone, which is a USB wireless microphone. So the QooCam 3 Ultra allows you to use either an external USB microphone or Bluetooth microphone to capture audio. So this is great because that means the person who is talking doesn't have to stand very close to the camera. I can stand wherever I want as long as I'm wearing the microphone. Then it should still be able to capture the audio very clearly. It's also very useful when you are recording in an outdoor place that is very windy, because even though when you edit the video you have the wind noise reduction feature, but if it's very windy you will still hear a lot of wind noise in your audio track. So this shouldn't be a problem if you are using a microphone that has a proper wind muff on it. Now, another benefit of the Bluetooth connection is that if you connect a Bluetooth headphone to it, then after you finish capturing the video, when you play it back, then you can hear the audio through your Bluetooth headset. So that allows you to listen to the audio much better than just using the built-in speaker on the camera. The QooCam 3 has a built-in cooling fan, which is a big selling point as we have just saw the results from the overheating test. However, the downside of the cooling fan is it will introduce cooling fan audio noise, which can be quite noticeable when you are recording in a quiet place. Actually, when the cooling fan is running at full speed, the noise can be really noticeable even when you're recording in a noisy area.
I was very keen, but then it turns out we had really different ideas. So we went separate ways with our songs. We still talk to each other. But yeah.
Kendall told me they are working on improving the audio processing algorithm to reduce audio noise from their studio software, which will help minimize the cooling fan noise. But if you want very clean audio without cooling fan noise, especially when you are recording indoor, it's best to use an external microphone. The QooCam 3 Ultra has a built-in 6-axis gyroscope for stabilization. Just like all the other 360 or action cameras in the market, stabilization is purely electronic stabilization. There's no optical or in-body mechanical image stabilizer. In terms of stabilization results, I found it is very decent. When I'm walking or even running, the footage is very stable. I did some side-by-side comparison with the Insta360 X4 and I found the results are very similar between these two cameras. When I was walking, I really don't see any significant difference. And when I start running, the video from both cameras are still reasonably smooth. The footage from the QooCam 3 Ultra has a little bit more jitter, those small vibration movement. The Insta360 X4 looks a little bit smoother as there is less jitters. However, the footage from the X4 looks quite a bit softer. So there's a bit of difference between these two cameras, but I don't think one is noticeably better than the other one. The QooCam 3 Ultra has built-in Wi-Fi. With the Wi-Fi connection, you can check if there is any new firmware available from the camera directly, and you can then just update from the camera if there is a new firmware version available. I have done multiple firmware upgrades during the beta period and it was all pretty easy, straightforward, and I have absolutely no problem at all. And this is easily the fastest and also easiest way for me to update the camera's firmware. You can also sync the camera clock easily without having to manually enter it, and again, it is a very easy process. But you should set up your time zone before you sync the clock. Otherwise, if you adjust the time zone after you sync the clock, it will mess up your clock. While the QooCam 3 Ultra performs really well in many areas, it is not a perfect camera. And I don't believe there is any perfect camera in this world. I've already mentioned a few things that I think it doesn't do as well as its competitor, but there are also a few other things that I haven't get around to talk about it so far. Firstly, the desktop software. In my QooCam 3 review, I have complained about the speed of the Kendall software, especially its desktop software QooCam Studio. I said the software is pretty slow and it's not very responsive. with the latest version that I'm using for this review, the video rendering speed is a lot faster. With some of the settings, it is almost the same speed as the Insta360 Studio, so that is great. And overall, it is also a lot more responsive compared to about a year ago. But I feel the software is still pretty basic in terms of feature and design. For example, the file view only shows you a thumbnail and the file name. There isn't any additional information about the video or photo files. I would like to see some basic color grading features or even just basic brightness or color adjustment tools. I would also like to see the ability to put multiple clips together, as right now, even if I want to do some very basic video editing, I still need to go to another video editing software after I render the video out from the QooCam Studio. To be fair, the Insta360 Studio also isn't that amazing in terms of features, and I found many bugs with it as well, but it is still better than the QooCam Studio in quite a few areas. I would also like to see more settings on the camera regarding the image and audio quality. For example, different sharpness level, different color profile, different audio recording level. Casual users may not mind not having these adjustments, but more advanced users would certainly love to be able to adjust and fine-tune these settings to meet their taste or requirements. And if you're recording 10-bit video, you don't have the preview once you started recording. This is probably due to some technical limitations, as I imagine processing 10-bit video output can be quite demanding. To be honest, it's not so much a problem for me, as once I started recording, I rarely check the screen anymore, apart from making sure it is still recording. But I want to mention it to you in case this is very important for you. If you're interested in this camera, I think naturally your decision will be between this and the Insta360 X4. They are both the latest 8K 360 cameras in the market, with similar, even though not exactly same price and features. The thing that impressed me the most about the QooCam 3 Ultra is the image quality. The QooCam 3 Ultra just performs really well, and it is much better than the X4 in my opinion. No matter we talk about the sharpness, details, dynamic range for both photo and video, the low light performance is also another strength of the QooCam 3 Ultra. Not only we can capture 8K under low light condition, unlike the X4 that we really have to drop back to 5.7K, and if we compare the low light 8K footage from the QooCam 3 Ultra to the 5.7K from the Insta360 X4, the QooCam 3 Ultra is still noticeably better. The real 10-bit HDR recording with the DR boost feature together also allows the QooCam 3 Ultra to create some really impressive 360 video that none of its competitors in this class can match. While HDR video is still not really popular today, but with more and more devices are now shipped with a HDR screen, it is a good way to future-proof yourself to get a camera that can generate HDR video. But anyway, if you want to create the best looking 360 video, the QooCam 3 Ultra is easily the best choice in the market right now. Other thing I really like about the QooCam 3 Ultra is the built-in GPS support, which makes it a great camera for people who travels a lot. Imagine went on a hiking trip with the QooCam 3 Ultra. Once you got home, you can see exactly where you took all the photos and videos and see the exact route for the video as well. And the geotagging is all done automatically by the camera itself without having to use any additional accessory or do extra steps to sync the GPS data. The built-in storage is also great and handy, but I definitely want to see Candle to do more in this area to take advantage of the fact that the camera has 2 storage options. And for people who need to shoot in hot places, the active cooling system would make a huge difference on how long you can record continuously. But the active cooling system is also a double-edged sword. And that leads me to talk about some of the cons of the QooCam 3 Ultra. The noise from the cooling fan is also captured by the built-in microphone quite easily. It's less of an issue when you are shooting outdoor, but it can be quite noticeable when shooting in a quiet indoor place. And when the camera gets really hot and the cooling fan is running at full speed, the noise generated by the cooling fan becomes really loud. Fortunately, there are a few options that allow you to connect an external microphone, but it is an additional accessory that you need to carry and set up, which may not be a problem for the more serious users, but it is a hassle for more casual users. Battery life is also quite average. Even with the bigger battery with the QooCam 3 Ultra this time, the recording time is still not that impressive. The Insta360 X4 is definitely much better in this area. I guess it is a price that we have to pay for the more advanced feature offered by the QooCam 3 Ultra, as these features requires the more powerful processor and active cooling system, etc., which all use up more power. In terms of features and settings that are available on the camera itself and also the desktop and the mobile app, I see Candle has made some noticeable improvements over the last year, and the overall performance has also improved quite a bit, but I feel Candle still has a little bit of catch up that they need to do if they want to match and overtake Insta360. Because of the more powerful hardware and all the other extra features, the QooCam 3 Ultra is also a bit heavier than the Insta360 X4. If you want to shoot with a long selfie stick, you will surely feel the extra weight from the end of the selfie stick. Price-wise, QooCam 3 Ultra is not exactly cheap. It is about $100 more expensive than the Insta360 X4. The price difference may also push some people towards the Insta360 X4. After all, Insta360 also has the more popular brand name. But we also need to remember the QooCam 3 Ultra has the built-in GPS, while if you use the Insta360 X4, you need to spend about $150 to buy the extra accessory if you want to use GPS with the X4. So if you include that price, the QooCam 3 Ultra is actually about $50 cheaper. And don't forget, the QooCam 3 Ultra also has the built-in 100GB storage space as well. That is another $20 or so that you can save with the QooCam 3 Ultra if you don't already have a fast, large micro SD card. So here are some of the main pros and cons I found about this brand new Candle QooCam 3 Ultra. Candle told me they have a lot of plans to make improvements to this camera and the software after they launch it, as the hardware is very powerful. So there are a lot of things that they can do in the future. For myself, the image quality is the most important thing for a 360 camera. So I'm happy with the trade-off if I shoot with the QooCam 3 Ultra. So I'm probably going to bring the QooCam 3 Ultra with me when I go to Japan next month. Another reason is it will be quite hot over there in Japan, so I don't want my 360 camera to overheat very easily. But what about you guys? What do you guys think about this QooCam 3 Ultra? Is this the best 360 camera in the market? Or do you still prefer the Insta360 X4 more? Drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts.